the famous Zodiac at Dendera. However, this is not the original. The French came here in 1798, hacked out the whole ceiling, and it is the basement of the Louvre. So this is a copy. It shows all the signs of the Zodiac and all the deckhands, but there's something very interesting here. It was first noted by the French, the Alsatian philosopher R.H. de Lubitsch, who was a mathematician. And he played with different angles, and he said, Cancer, the sign of Cancer, is playing a prominent role here at different angles. So they postulated, and Barbara Ann Clow agreed, that it's saying here that this is from a much older zodiac, going back to the age of Cancer, which is Neolithic, 8,000 BCE, way before the Greeks and anybody else came up with astrology or astronomy. And so you get all of them here, and Cancer playing a key role. And now Patricia can take it to a much further level.
Okay, remember when we were downstairs and I said that you had all of the cycles and cycles within cycles illustrated on the ceiling in two-dimensional form? Well, now we're looking at it in three-dimensional format as the spirals, the sacred spirals, the breath of life that I talked about in the lecture. And it's going in to center and spiraling out. And as Stephen said, it spirals out from Cancer because this is when we fall into duality, when we fall into this moment when the face of man is born, when we begin our process, the hero's journey, correct?
Especially Gemini the next sign.
Well, this is the first time. The reason the calendar starts with Cancer is because this is when we can begin to measure time and space from the point. The point is the North Pole. If you look up, this is the point where I showed you the image of the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper that forms the swastika that's spinning, okay? Here's Taret. Taret has Draco on her back, and she holds the Dipper, and she's connected to the North Pole. She is the center. There's the leg of the bull, which represents that small Dipper. This is the beginning of the measure of time and space that breathes out into aspects of itself, all the 36 letters, 360 to be exact, and breathes back in again. And I showed you the symbol of the tarot card, which is the Fool, when we were downstairs. And that is Osiris. He is the green man. He is the face of man. He is the land. And here he is again. See him with his staff? He is beginning his journey right at the beginning, and then he walks through all of the aspects, the 12 houses, the 12 gates of consciousness experiencing itself as form, and back again. You see the feminine letters. Look at, these are all of Ezekiel's wheels. This is what you're looking at, and they're cycles within cycles within cycles. And you see the two figures that look like Horus, the hawk-headed. You see them at the four different angles. These are the four elements, the four seasons. They represent equinoxes, equal nights. And then you see the feminine figures. They're all holding up in Ka position because this is form, Ka. This is representing life force in the physical form. And the feminine are at the positions where we're marking the solstices, the soul sisters. These are the wombs of every next cycle. And of course there's four elements, 4 seasons. It all is related. You can look at the math, but the math is only describing the sacred form of the breath of life. And there it is.
So basically, again, Schwallow was saying that there's never been a full precession of equinoxes. It started with Cancer, but they calculated as if it was back from the beginning. But the Zodiac actually starts with Cancer. In that age, Neolithic age, 8,000 BCE.
This is outside the Cairo Museum, or the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, Egypt. And what you're looking at is a dynastic box, likely a sarcophagus, made out of granite, likely from Aswan, or the eastern desert of Egypt. But this, right next to it, this is a pre-dynastic box. This is older than the other one you just looked at, and the precision of its making is astonishing. You'll notice there are no hieroglyphics on it, and the flatness of the surfaces are something possibly we could do today, but it still would be very difficult in the 21st century. So what you're looking at is an example of something created thousands of years prior to the dynastic Egyptians existing in Egypt, and made by a much more ancient culture that also created structures such as the Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau and the Serapeum boxes at Saqqara. Again, with my hand, I can feel an almost perfect curve on the side and here on the top. This had to have been done with lost ancient high technology. And here inside the Cairo Museum are objects in one corner. Unfortunately, this is a little out of focus and not in high definition because technically you're not supposed to film. But what you're going to see here are the marks of a saw, especially right here. You can see it's a flexible saw of some kind, cutting into basalt, which is an extremely hard stone. Lost ancient high technology.
We'll repeat everything for you, Joey. They ended the work, and not like the Romans, they didn't cut it into pieces and use it, they left it. It had to be perfect the first time. If not, we discard it and we do it over. And thank God they left it for us. This is the ultimate smoking gun. Dude, I dropped the mic.
As was said in the previous clip by Stephen Mailer, whoever was operating this saw made a mistake. The saw went off course. Very human trait. This is called the schist disc. The label on it actually says Lotus display stand or something, but clearly it's some kind of part of a mechanism of some kind. And in fact, the stone it's made of is not schist. It's much finer and harder. Geologist Susan Moore believes that this is a metamorphosed silt of some kind, and thus is very hard and also very resonant. It clearly once fit on some kind of shaft. And here's a side view going up to a top view. Unfortunately, it was really badly repaired because it was found broken. But originally it would have been technically a very fine product. And here you see that the blades are not tilted one way or the other, so it wouldn't pull or push air or water, which is quite curious. It was found in a cache at the site called Saqqara in the 19th century, I believe. And the other objects found with it were 30,000 or 40,000 turned hard stone bowls, which also could not have been created by the dynastic Egyptians because the age of it is prior to the invention even of the potter's wheel. It is quite likely that it's not the only one of its kind. There could have been many more found, and for some strange reason, an out-of-place artifact like this is on display in this museum, and that's what we were seeking on this trip in Cairo in March 2017. Copies have been made using 3D printers, but in order to truly find out what it was and what it did, you would have to make it out of the exact same stone material, and that so far has not been tried. Hopefully it will be in the future. These, they claim, were made more than 4,500 years ago, which is impossible because it's very hard stone and would require the use of a high-speed lathe. This example is very hard diorite stone, so again it would have to be turned on a lathe. The problem is the two protuberances that are on it would get chopped off if you used a lathe. And these are very thin examples, very challenging to a 21st century machinist. So how could they have been made 4,500 years ago? And here's the side profile. Again, they would have to have been made on a high-speed lathe of some kind. And here is a very curious example, damaged, maybe 2 millimeters thick, that would have to have, again, have been made on a lathe. And here the camera comes down on it. Once again, you see how thin it is. And when was the damage caused? Was it caused during the manufacturing or later? Look at the amazing symmetry of it, the thinness, and they even date this one at either being 4,500 years old or possibly older. Now, if 5 or 10 of them had been found, then you could call them anomalies. But they even claim 30 to 40,000 of them were found at Saqqara. That means there was a major manufacturing facility with a high level of technology. That makes these truly amazing artifacts. They do not fit in at all with the technology of dynastic Egypt. The fact that they're on display is quite amazing. What else do they have hidden away in the warehouses in Cairo? And this is one of the oddest artifacts of all. It could partly have been done on a lathe, but the folds suggest another kind of technology altogether. This is a truly curious piece. It seems to be made of the same material as the so-called schist disc, but as far as I know, no one knows where the actual quarry of this stone is. And not only did they have lathe technology, they also had high-speed drills with a minimum of diamond tip. And then this large granite box has tube drills. You see the little tube drill holes there? Again, you're talking at least diamond tip technology. And once again, more hollow tube drills. Diamond tool technology was not invented, as far as we know, until the 19th century AD. Look at the flatness of these surfaces. This is either diorite or basalt, likely diorite. There's no way that that could have been done by hand, and there's no way it could have been done during dynastic times. Something like this would be a great example of 21st century technology, and yet they label it as if it was made by the dynastic Egyptians. Did they think we're really that stupid? What is clear is that the dynastic Egyptians found this object, and then they carved their hieroglyphics into the surface. The hieroglyphics are not as sophisticated as the surfaces themselves, and that we see over and over again. Found objects recycled. And then the curiosity of the elongated headed sculptures of the Amarna or Akhenaten period. It would appear that Akhenaten was trying to tell us something, possibly that his ancestors looked like this. Contrary to popular belief, the mummy of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and the 6 daughters have never been found, so we have no tangible evidence that they themselves had elongated heads. However, Akhenaten is clearly telling us something. So join us in March of 2018 as we return to Egypt to look at these curious objects and other examples of things that do not fit the typical and standard record of history. We're at Abidos Temple, and this is the home of the famous or infamous helicopter, submarine, and tank, so-called hieroglyphs, and also the home to the spectacular Osirion, which is a megalithic structure that you'll see either in this video or the next one.
Here we are at Abidos, and this is the temple of Wizard Osiris. It was not dedicated to any king. But here's a famous glyphs that people have talked about for years. Actually, I knew the woman who took the first picture here in 1988, and it spread all around when the internet came, and everybody thinks it's aliens, spaceships, helicopters. But if we look up at it, and the scientific term in archaeology is called a palimpsest, P-A-L-I-M-P-S-E-T. That means it's one layer of glyphs. Someone comes along, puts another layer of glyphs on top. The top layer flakes off, and it reveals a scene that was not there. So, and people want to say spaceships, aliens, whatever. But how Abdel Hakim explained it to us is everything's in duality, everything's in polarity. If what's on the east wall has to be on the west wall, what's on the north wall has to be on the south wall. If you just go up here, right around, that's Seti I's glyphs, without any helicopters, any spaceships, it would be, if it was done intentionally, it would be also on that wall as well as this wall. So we deny it. And if people look at, and actually someone did an excellent thing on the internet by taking an overlay of the original Seti I glyphs, putting over that, and you can see where it fits in. If you look up at the bottom left, on the bottom, you see the straight-like lines. You can see it's on top of something underneath. It is a palimpsest. End of discussion.
Okay.
This is one of the famous king's lists, the one here at Abidos. There's at least 5 of them. Supposedly has all the titles, kings going back from the first dynasty all the way up. But it's a very interesting thing here, because if this does represent the 19th dynasty, they attempted to totally eliminate the Amarna family. And indeed, the cartouches go from Amenhotep III, Akhenaten's father, to Seti I. And they eliminate the whole Amarna family, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, all of them, or even Horemheb. And so here is an attempt to change history. So I always say you can't trust these things as being accurate for history. They're political. The priests are doing this. This is not any king ordering this. The priests control this. And at this time, they're trying to wipe out all memory of Akhenaten and the Amarna family. In fact, the labels they gave him now were the heretic of Amarna, the criminal of Amarna. So his attempt to return to the age of Aten is now finally over, and we're back in Amen. And they eliminate him, thinking that if you take a title or a personality out, you take them away from history. We know.
Can you point to them, please?
I think, I'm not sure, that this is Menmatra. I think that's the end of the 18th dynasty, so we begin the 19th dynasty down here. But Yusuf would know for sure. But for sure, that is the case. None of the Amarna kings or titles are listed here. It goes straight from Amenhotep III to the 19th dynasty.
Okay. We are at Abidos in Egypt, where the Abidos temple is, built by the dynastic Egyptians. But what's actually more profound is what you're going to see next, and that is what is called the Osirion, which is a subterranean megalithic structure. This was originally a single piece of travertine stone, and it's unlikely that the quarry is in Egypt. It could be as far away as Turkey. And this is a different building made of giant slabs on the roof of Travertine. Look at the incredible straightness of this line. Unlikely that it could have been done by hand. And here you see a saw cut in granite, likely an ancient power saw. And look at the precision of all of these surfaces. This groove looks like it was done by a power router. And here is another example. Machine-like quality. This, on the other hand, is dynastic construction. You can see that the pillars are made of several pieces of stone. So what we find at Karnak is a dynastic construction around the core, which is several thousand years older, and shows signs of lost ancient technology. This is supposed to be the east-west line, but it's 23.5 degrees off of true east and west. This gives us evidence that the original causeway here was constructed 12,000 years ago, prior to the Earth having its present axis of 23.5 degrees off, up and down. And here you see incredible weathering patterns that are not simply from wind and sand, but could have been scorching heat as the result of plasma ejection from the sun. And as well, here we have more saw marks. Had to have been done with a power saw of some kind. in granite, not a handsaw. There is a giant drill hole, and again, more evidence of incredible, what looks like heat damage to the surfaces. And once again, more of what looks like heat scorching rather than normal weathering. This is all over the area called the Holy of Holies, which is the ancient original center of Karnak, made long before dynastic times, and we believe at least 12,000 years ago. Again, more what appears to be heat scorching. And here we have cracks that appear to again have been done by heat. So there is ample evidence at Karnak and other locations nearby that ancient structures were struck with possibly plasma ejection from the sun, as theorized by Dr. Robert Schoch in his latest book. He's also the man who was able to date the Sphinx at being much older than the dynastic Egyptians. So as we come to the end of the east-west axis, which is off by 23.5 degrees, again we see scorching of the stone, both in the granite and also in the travertine. The travertine has eroded in a different way because the crystal size is much larger. It looks like pieces literally exploded off of the surface. And two ancient drill holes once again. Okay, we're here with geologist Susan Moore, and Susan is going to describe the phenomenon that happened to this stone, which is a granite-like stone, I believe.
These stones in this little area, they've been puzzlement to us for numerous years. We keep trying to figure out what went wrong with these, why they're like it. And if you could look at the rock here, you can see that the inner portion of the rock is a coarser crystalline size, and the outer side seems to have a finer crystalline crust. This is a fairly wide crust. This is a narrower crust. We just don't know why it's doing this. We actually see the same thing in a pillar, a door pillar over here. And, unless we could analyze these things, we're probably never going to know. But what it looks like to me, and this is just sheer speculation, is that the inner portion of this has recrystallized, and as it cooled, the outer portion of it cooled down quicker and made this finer grained crust.
Okay, and that would likely be the result of intense heat.
Intense heat.
Action.
Okay, we've been coming here since the first time we started exploring this temple on our own, and the keepers would bring us in here and say, this is the real Holy of Holies. And the first thing we noticed is that the destruction of this particular granite, or is it?
It's a diorite.
I'm sorry,
Diorite.
yeah. This particular rock, you can see its destruction, the destruction's from the inside out. And what is, what would cause something like that? So our theory was it was the energy of the site. But as we move in our research and our learning, we think about all the different possibilities. Yes, maybe the energy, that they're harnessing a magnetic current here, but is there another event from above that connects and hits this is attracted to this magnetic energy that causes this explosion? And as Susan would just explain, could create something like this that we can't create today with our own technology. Okay, here we are on the island of Agilika, which is where they've moved the Temple of Isis, block by block, piece by piece, from an island that's over here, which is Philae, that we're familiar with. What we're looking at in front of us over here is the island of Biga. And Hakim had once said that this is the island where the heart of the divine feminine was. And maybe there's a misunderstanding about this, but it's my belief. They say this is an island we're not allowed to go to. This is totally off limits to the public. Again, which makes you wonder. But they say that there is a very powerful temple to Osiris here. If you understand the mythology and the symbolism, Osiris and Nebhet were twins, born at the same time as Iset and Set, Isis and Set. So what, in my opinion, you're looking at is two sets of twins that are identifying form and formless. And if this is an island that is dedicated now to Osiris, he would be the form. He is the face of the land. He represents the 42 nomes of Egypt. And the division comes when Set, the sun Set, cuts him into these 42 pieces. When this happens, Set is the spirit placed in the physical form. So he becomes that spirit. Nebhet, the twin of Osiris, becomes the heart. She's the hidden heart of humanity. And therefore she is the heartbeat, the life force that is hidden within the container of the physical body, Osiris being the physical body. So if we're looking at this whole setup here in Aswan, we're actually looking at Biga being the heart of the Nile, the heart of the fertility of the Nile, which is the electromagnetic current or the life force or the pulse of the land coming from, and again I would liken her to the pot of gold, which is what's inside the container that becomes released. So Iset would be, she's the magic, she is the energetic container. The wings of Isis represent the magnetic field that surrounds the earth or the land, or even the human body. So you can liken it, it's fractal, it's an understanding of energy. And so this is what we're actually seeing expressed here within the temple, the energetic temple structures that are housed on this land. This is unfortunately the only one that we can see and experience, and it is an extremely powerful temple. Even though they have moved it, it's still a powerful temple as you walk through it. And each part of it is expressing a part of the human body, the part of the energetics of walking through the center, through the polarity of the two sides of this human body that we express in this form.
The Alexander the Great.
This floor is not a Russian. All of it was granite. So when they cut the temple, first when they built the temple in the ancient times, they made part of.
What you'll notice is that this entire temple is made out of sandstone, and yet it's on an island of solid granite. So if the dynastic Egyptians who built this, if they had the capability of working in granite, why wouldn't they have made the whole structure out of granite rather than importing sandstone? The reason why they did is that they had the capability of shaping sandstone, which is much softer than granite. And that tells us that all of the granite work in general, at least the large-scale things in Egypt, are pre-dynastic and created using an ancient advanced form of technology.
obviously ancient Kemet. And you have a lot of these altars here for bronze, granite, and cyanite that was brought here from other temples, much older temples. And this temple was brought for a lot of things, but it's been moved from its original location. So the energy is not as strong as it was probably originally.
Mm-hmm.
But very much desecrated temple here. It's interesting to know that the Persians may have caused most of the damage, not the Coptics like we thought.
Ah.
That was a good teaching.
This Isis temple is no longer in its original position, or in fact it's not even on its original island, because when they built the big dam here in order to create electricity for Egypt, the original island this was on was much lower, and therefore the temple would have been submerged underwater permanently. And so National Geographic organized to have the whole temple disassembled and reassembled here. One problem with that is that the original place where it was built was energetically special. Almost all temples are built on energetically special places, so therefore that's why to me this temple has a bit of a dead feeling, because it doesn't have the energetic nature of its original location. We are on the River Nile, heading towards Aswan, and more specifically to the Elephantine Island, where there are some amazing megalithic structures not properly understood by most academics. This is the 5-star cruise ship, the Blue Nile, which we use every March on our yearly tour of Egypt. And it is a truly spectacular ship to be on. As you likely know, the Nile is one of the 2 longest rivers in the world, but it's not that wide. The Amazon, which is in Peru and Brazil, is a much wider river, but the Nile has an incredible history and is very majestic, especially when you get outside of the cities, where you can see life as it has been for hundreds of years. You still see oxen working in the fields. And then we transfer to a smaller boat here, as you can see. That's Aswan in the background. And with the boats still plying the river in this area, it gives you a very timeless feeling. It's always a pleasure to travel to Egypt once a year, because there's always new things to find. Such as boomerangs in this museum. It's likely, literally, that they were brought from Australia. But what we're here to look for and look at is catastrophic damage at this site on Elephantine Island. The precision of the stonework, especially in granite here, tells us that this work is pre-dynastic. It could not have been done by the dynastic Egyptians because they did not have the capability of cutting granite. At least not efficiently, and you would first think this is simply damage done by some culture, but the destruction level is so excessive that it could have been done by a plasma burst from the sun 12,000 years ago. Luckily, objects such as what I am walking up to now are preserved more or less intact. Now this object is one piece of granite, and the level of precision, once again, is beyond the capability of the dynastic Egyptians, and had to have been an inheritance from an earlier culture that had lost ancient high technology. And also, what its original function was is completely unknown. Someone, of course, will say, well, it's a ceremonial something, but we don't really know what the original function was. And look at the weathering on this granite. Look at the huge cracks. This is not the result of normal weathering, but this could have been done if intense heat had struck the surface in the distant past. And these also are parts of the original structure that have been reassembled both in dynastic times, and what you're looking at here is actual dynastic addition. So the dynastic Egyptians made repairs using limestone to the original structure. Again, the dynastic Egyptians were not able to cut and shape granite very well, but limestone was not that difficult for their hardened bronze and iron, possibly even steel tools. So it is the site itself which is telling us who made it and possibly when. In many locations in Egypt, we find the remnants of lost ancient high technology that was later adopted by the dynastic Egyptians and used often for a completely different purpose.
Give me about an hour, I'll have my obelisk ready.
Harder!
So they say because this is impossible and they realize that this is impossible, they said they made a line of mud brick, two walls and empty space between it, not the edge of granite stone, but a deeper part in the mountain because all this was quarry, this was the core of the mountain. We see the brick, it's a side effect because we didn't want it. But in some cases you can find the carving. Slow. Here number 2. Here my friend.
Okay, Peter, you're an engineer. What can you comment about the plausibility that this work was done with stone hammers. And the main question I have is, how do you think they were going to attempt to get this out of the pit that it's in?
But I think first of all, doing it with stone probably wouldn't have worked. Probably have taken too much time to do it, and you wouldn't get this kind of alignment. I mean, this is pretty big. And then there's another question of the spacing just between the rock and the bedrock. How would you fit people in there? For how long? How would that work? And then to get it out, I mean, you need a structure on top of these rugs, which just, you know, it's impossible to set up. Even if you set it up, you need to probably move it at one point in time. And why do it in the end? I mean, that's one of the main questions. I mean, if you can just take small pieces of rock, just put them all together, you could just do that. But they preferred to take this huge piece of rock out of the ground. The question is why.
It was left. You wanted to see what it looks like until you go down where Brian's going. Now here, see the scopes? See the scopes? Uniform scopes. Oh, they're putting all these blocks in front of us now. Isn't that interesting? Careful. Okay, this is what looks like another unfinished obelisk behind the large one, only shown to me in 2009 by someone who was local. And it's also very indistinct from the outside. It's not till you come down here that you see they were undercutting, scooping out just like they did the big one. And to his credit, Brian Foster in 2015 saw the crack there and said, Stephen, this is why they stopped this one. Exactly right. Same thing. They got to this point undercutting, and they didn't even bother. And here you can see they were being shaped as an obelisk. And they stopped. Yeah. Sorry. And we got Chris down here in 2013, and he was videoing. It was great.
Also that.
There's nothing else here. Thank you, lady. Once they saw we started to come here, then they're going to take interest about what we're doing. So these rocks were put down from 2013. We came back 2015. This was here.
Reminds me of the crates.
Yep.
I'm constantly quoting you, my master.
So we go both ways, my friend.
That's right.
When it comes to quoting the Inca, I talk about you. You are the authority. And pre-Inca.
So how many of these quarries do they go around and those test holes to find the high quality stuff? Who knows?
Okay, we're at a police/military base here in the Nile Delta. This place is very surreal. We've been going through incredible agricultural areas, and now this whole ancient archaeological site has basically almost nothing growing on it.
You always got the good one, huh?
There is a huge chunk here of milky quartz that I love too much. Wow. Probably the largest one remains in any other side.
So we're several hundred miles away from any granite or quartzite stone quarry, and yet look at the number and size of these huge blocks here. So Patricia, was all this stuff found buried?
Yep, absolutely. They've moved it, lined it all up here. And you can look out here and you'll look at how the desert moves and all these lumps, everything under there. This site is covered. We're probably only seeing 2%, if that, of what's underneath the sands. And as you walk around, you're going to see you're going to see the obelisks that they tried to take away, and because they didn't understand the physics of it, they're broken in two all over the place. Over here is the sacred lake, and it's built and constructed, and there's even, as you go down the steps, you can see there's writings along the bottom. But this whole site, most of it's underground. But what we're seeing is unbelievable.
When I've been reading Petrie's original text, he said that there was roughly 120-foot colossi here. One colossi, but he speculates that there should have been two, but they've only found the one. But he said it was all into pieces, and from Ramses II time, they have been carving things out of these pieces, but said there was enough pieces that he could fit it together into a minimum of 120 feet high.
And it would have been a granitic stone.
That he said it was a granitic as opposed to being the quartzite like these ones.
Any estimate on the weight?
Well, he equated it with the Ramesseum.
So
Big.
700 to 1,000
Yes.
tons, moved either from the eastern desert or from Aswan Quarry,
That's right.
which is at the opposite end of Egypt.
That's right.
But the damage is much more on the right side than the left side. Wow.
Why is it cut like that? Because the statue itself was broken apart, and this was used as a block in modern structures like this.
Wow.
But when you look at a statue that is this big, and you look at the size of the foot, and then look at the size of a foot like this size, then how the
125 feet tall.
Yeah. Look, the only statue with this much, which in my opinion, it was once in my opinion, megalithic.
These are not Aswan granite. These have a really they have a reasonable quartz content in them. So I'm not sure where they come from. It's either going to be in Sinai or the eastern desert, but they have quite a bit of quartz in them. So they are, look at how coarse and loose that is.
Yeah.
They're going to break apart a lot quicker than some of the darker ones.
And we can see that it's not as perfect as the structures in the pyramid structure. Here, there is huge space between them.
Doing dynamic video here, folks. One solid piece of granite. So this is dynastic work, or later. You can see it's limestone, small pieces, and then we have this landscape here. Solid chunks of granite, either from the eastern desert or Aswan in the absolute south of Egypt. And obelisks whose surface here is exceedingly heavily eroded. Lots of obelisks.
But also it has another good evidence to it that we can see. Look at the amount of flints in it.
I think perhaps that these came first because they've got the better cuts that have been preserved. And I think it's because they're finer crystalline size and the lattice structure holds together. So when they cut it with precision, it holds that precise angle and the smoother cut on it. Right. But this is not like these tubes and it's the precision cuts on it.
Oh, this is travertine? And you think that it's possible that the Travertine isn't even from Egypt?
Well, from what I've seen of the hot springs around here, they are fairly small hot springs. This could be from one of the smaller hot springs because you can see the crystal size. Whereas, remember in Karnak, we were seeing those calcite crystals about this thick before they hit the mudstone. That thick again, mudstone. These are very small. I think this may be local or maybe just on the edge of one.
Okay.
How solid is strength in the most? 7. 7?
That's not the silica. What you had there is, see, that was quartzite with shirt there with flint in it. So not the silica would give it a percent.
Those are not.
Right.
No.
Well, see, there was a piece at the other place that.
So, Susan, here's an interesting piece of stone or something.
It's got gas bubbles in it. I think it's a piece of slag from. I've read the Romans used to work glass here, but it may have been something else that they were working. But that appears to be a piece of slag.
Okay, but could it be a piece of cooked stone?
No.
No?
When you feel it, it's just way lighter. It's from the smelting process.
Oh, yeah, there's way too much destruction and surface damage here. Possible evidence of the stone being scorched. Very cool.
Yeah. This freedom has under salt water. Like the black soil. Black soil.
So you see the limestone, and that tells us this is likely dynastic period. However, you have these massive slabs of granite, and not just massive slabs of granite. This is actually a room or series of rooms which are now underground, but could have been above ground thousands upon thousands of years ago. Solid granite room leading on to another room.
Yes, it's like this on top.
We Shashank, positionist, also Kuntu. We come.
Oh, that's a box
Good, very good. This we close.
with the lid on it. So, an underground structure with giant slabs of granite. And I don't know what that is, whether it might be a box. So this site is called Tannis. It's located about 4 hours north of Cairo. Phenomenal site, megalithic, seems to have been buried as a result of a cataclysm. It was likely dug up during dynastic times by Ramses II in order to utilize the granite for other construction purposes. And then the famous French archaeologist Mariette did some work here and others. We're on our way through this small town to a location you probably never heard of. It's called Abusir, and it's a site of great antiquity that has dynastic works as well as evidence of lost ancient high technology, which would in fact be older than any of the dynastic works. Again, it's called Abusir, and you need special permission, which we were able to get in order to visit it. This is at Abusir itself, and as you can see, it's been terribly decimated over the course of time, from invading armies, people simply using the ancient site as a quarry. And here you see pillars, which are made of granite. The granite itself came from Aswan, which is likely 500 miles away. And we also see evidence, and abundant evidence in this location especially, of strange drill holes in very hard stone, which again could not have been done by the dynastic Egyptians. These are tube drill holes which would have to at least be embedded with diamonds in order to achieve such size and such depth. So the mystery is, who was the culture that had technology of this level thousands of years before our time and thousands of years before the time of the dynastic Egyptians?
Right inside. It's very straight through. Beautiful. Go ahead.
So here you see the level of the devastation of invading cultures and armies, and such a sad sight to see. However, there's also evidence that a massive cataclysm of some kind struck this site actually prior to dynastic times, and the timeline we're looking at is 12,000 years ago. Look at the weird erosion on these limestone posts, as if they were burned by something. And then also these amazing granite stone boxes, one which is shattered, but the other is almost intact. In order to get at them, you have to go down through this hole and down this chute and out the other end. Now the crispness of the edges and the flat surfaces could not have been achieved with hand tools, so we are looking at some form of advanced technology being employed in order to shape these surfaces. The edges are incredibly crisp after thousands of years, and the curved surfaces are perfectly curved. There are no depressions, no protrusions. So again, it's a mystery as to who did this work, but that's why we encourage you to come with us in March of 2018 and see for yourself. Again, we have these strange, heavily eroded surfaces. So here at Abusir, what I've been showing is the fact that in general, this site is dynastic. Everything lines up north, south, east, and west. However, there are pre-dynastic elements here that are 23 degrees off north, south, east, and west. And that goes along with my theory about a massive cataclysm happening here in the Giza Plateau area 12,000 years ago. The major damage from this cataclysm seems to be here in what is more or less the center of the ancient land called Abusir, or the land of Osiris. And then when we go south and north, the damage becomes less and less. At one end you have Dashur with the bent pyramid and the red pyramid. The skin of the pyramids is sloughed off. And then the other direction, you go to the Giza Plateau, same thing. The three great pyramids are still there, generally intact, but the skin or casing stone is missing.
Kind of seems out of place, doesn't it? Just sitting.
Yeah. Well, you see all the saw marks in this?
Yeah.
So those saw marks that you saw would require diamond level of technology, because the stone is basalt, or possibly even a harder siltstone of some kind. And that's not something, as you know by now, that the dynastic Egyptians had. So they clearly inherited ancient sites that appear to have been devastated by some cataclysmic activity. And that, of course, is recounted in my book, Aftershock.
What we can see here is clear marking of a circular giant saw. We can see from the pattern here that it's circling, and we can see that the lines also are all continuing in a circular, not a straight line. And when we talk about if we complete this circle, it's not going to be less than 8 meters, right?
Yeah.
Cannot be less than 8 meters wide.
It was at least 20 feet in diameter and 3/16 of an inch thick.
Yeah.
And it's penetrated the stone 2 millimeters per revolution, which is 500 times more efficient than what we have in the 21st century.
Yeah. So again, no scenes on the walls displayed any method of cutting the stones using a saw. We only understood this from the marking of the stone on the stone itself, from the marking of the tool on the surface of the stone. Also, if we want to know how thick that tool was, we can look here from the corner, and you can see part that is still curving back on the higher part here. You see that? That will tell us how thick this blade was, which was probably around 4 millimeter thick. That's huge to take this kind of machining, the heat, the scratches from circling. So We don't believe copper can be able to do this. We cannot see also the scenes, but we want to make more like experiments about this type of stone and the
Another obvious question is, where does this stone come from? And according to our geologist, Susan Moore, and according to the Geology Museum in Cairo, the Eastern Desert, a deposit at least 200 kilometers away. Okay, now we're heading to Abu Gurab, or Abu Gorab, or Abu Jurab, which is a dynastic site, but it also has some very curious pre-dynastic elements, a lot of evidence of lost ancient high technology machining. So this is Abu Gurab. You can see it looks like a desert wasteland, right on the edge, though, of where there is life. And here we find these large bowl-like things that were found by Flinders Petrie, I believe in the 19th century. And you can see the hole that is strategically located right in the center of each one, but not at the bottom. So very curious. These unlikely were done by hand, much more likely they were done with some kind of advanced technology. They were not found all together as you see them now, but they were lined up, possibly to be sent to the Cairo Museum, but actually never made it there. So you see, in terms of the detail, these depressions and these weird cog-like knobs, again, we see signs of machine marks in them. So again, likely they were done using some form of high technology. They're also heavily weathered in places. It's most probable that they were found buried underground and were lined up like this. Quite strange. And then as we turn, we see the ruins of a small pyramid that was destroyed in some strange manner. Also, there's a slight curve here where the hole enters the bowl, as if that was where liquid moved into the bowl. And then around the rim, very machine-like curve or depression, as if done by some kind of router. Now, as we advance towards the pyramid, we're coming up first to a very fascinating construction out of stone called the Hotep. And this is comprised of large pieces of the crystalline stone. As you can see, actually there are 6 pieces. And here again, the curvature where the vertical and horizontal surfaces meet are so smooth and even, it's as if they were done by some kind of router. And then we see flat surfaces, which are almost perfectly flat. Very difficult to do by hand. And again, where the horizontal and vertical surfaces meet, we also see some kind of tube drill evidence. And then we have an overview of the Hotep. And here you can see with the compass that this little pyramid is about 23 or 24 degrees off north, south, east, and west, which is quite curious because normally they're lined up perfectly north, south, east, and west. And some of the casing stone is still present, But the whole pyramid, rather than being bashed by vandals, it literally looks like it exploded. And here again we find more evidence of ancient tube drilling. And the Hotep is comprised of 6 pieces. You can see at the bottom there that horizontal machine cutting mark. And some believe that this is actually the lid of a shaft that goes down and interconnects with a tunnel system. So the Hotep is made out of a stone called Travertine, and it is created in places of volcanic activity with liquid water pools. According to our geologist, Susan Moore, there may not be a large enough area of travertine located in Egypt, so it may have actually been brought in from another part of the Middle East. It's in 6 sections and perfectly aligned to north, south, east, and west, but the pyramid in behind is 23 degrees off. So the pyramid was created prior to the time of the pharaonic Egyptians, and in fact possibly 12,000 plus years ago. This, no one knows when this was made. So again, like we've seen at other locations, especially in the Giza Plateau area, though they say that the pyramids are in such bad shape because they were quarried, maybe even during dynastic times, the damage looks cataclysmic, as if it was struck by something, possibly high heat, and that fits in with the theory of Dr. Robert Schoch, the geologist, that solar plasma may have actually struck specific parts of the Earth around 12,000 years ago, and that would have caused this cataclysmic damage because the core is just a mess. You would think that if it was being slowly quarried that the core would still be intact, but it does look like a high heat event just blew and cracked the entire pyramid, including the center. Luckily, some of the casing stone is still here, but of course all of the upper casing stone is gone because it would have been literally blown off. Abusir and Abu Gurab are not seen by tourists, and in general they are off limits. You require special permission from the Ministry of Antiquities to visit these sites. The explanation or reasoning for that is unknown, but we are here because we have permission thanks to the Kemet School located in Giza in Egypt. Check out their website at www.chematology.com. They are the only people, in my opinion, who can properly show you dynastic as well as pre-dynastic, super ancient Egypt. Now, on the other side of the pyramid are these sandstone bowls that have 3 holes drilled in them. Look at the level of weathering and wear on them. They too were most likely found buried underground, and they have clearly been vandalized over the course of time. No one has a clue what these originally were used for. Egyptologists say they were bowls for sacrificial blood, but how would you drain the blood out if the hole is not in the bottom? So to me, this entire site, yes, it's been vandalized over the course of time. Some of the stone appears to have scorch heat marks, and so I think this is a very good candidate for the ancient cataclysm of 12,000 years ago. What I'm saying is that 5,000 years ago, the dynastic Egyptians found this and the Giza Plateau and other structures in the area in a state of decay. They renamed them and they reused them for their own purposes. But the whoever the original builders were still eludes us to this very day.
Like here, honey.
So this whole site is in complete ruins. And the standard story would be, well, it was an invading force or army that came and destroyed it all. But we're seeing more cataclysmic damage, as in some kind of natural force initially destroyed the city. Then later it was reoccupied. Many of the pieces were recycled. But we have sculptures such as this one coming up, which is made out of quartzite. And quartzite cannot be carved with the bronze chisels of the dynastic Egyptian period. Therefore, we have no choice but to conclude that it was carved by an older civilization long before the existence of the dynastic Egyptians. These vessels, which also are granite, could have been reshaped by the dynastic Egyptians, because by pounding with a hard stone, you can shape granite in a primitive way. But contrast that with this, which is incredibly smooth and looks more like it's been machined. And also the fact that it seems to have been tuned to a very specific tone. Now this looks almost like, or maybe is, machining technology in the quartzite as compared to the rougher work of the dynastic Egyptians using maybe iron or other primitive tools. And this sculpture, the surface looks like it's just been fried by high heat and clearly snapped in half. So is this also evidence of an ancient cataclysmic event that struck this location as well as others we've seen, such as at Karnak and Memnon and the Ramesseum? So this is an absolutely huge ancient site. Most of it's dynastic Egyptian, which is kind of boring. But what's intriguing is all of the roads and all of the houses are out of north, south, east, west alignment by about 23 degrees. So that could very well mean that 12,000 years ago, if the Earth was perfectly vertical and not at 23.5-degree tilt as it is now, that the ancient megalithic builders were here first, and then when the dynastic Egyptians appeared, they just decided not to alter the planning strategy, and they built theirs, all of their work also, 23.5 degrees off, north, south, east, and west. That's great, thank you.
it's all cracked.
Yeah. So we found the pre-dynastic center here. It was clearly devastated by some kind of ancient cataclysm. We have rich deposits of calcium carbonate that likely came from the ocean, from flooding in from the ocean. And so the city itself is built over that way because in order to build here, they would have had, the dynastic people would have had to have cleared all the stone out of the area. So they found virgin territory over there and built their mud brick houses and limestone coffins and limestone edifices. But this is the megalithic core of this site. What have you found, Russell?
Box. Got remnants of a box.
You have. You found the best smoking gun here, thank you.